Okay, we're going to, just a little bit different this time. Let's get a rural crime perspective from a couple of our panelists, or at least one of them. Maybe, Melody, could we start with you way down yonder? I know I said I'd come to you on agriculture, but I think you got a relative story to share too.
Thank you. I do. I have a very relevant story, and I will say this to begin with. I value the RCMP. I grew up with the RCMP in my area. We're about 35 minutes from any detachment. But when I grew up, there was police officers that would come to our table and have coffee. And when I got caught speeding, they knew Garner justice was going to be worse than their justice. So it was a phone call to my dad, and I was grounded for a month. But times have changed, folks. I was out this weekend with a group of girlfriends putting some training on horses. We came across a group of individuals that had been imbibing in some, I guess, fun holiday spirits, enjoying the river. Sounds lovely, except they trespassed across our land to get there. When I asked them about the trespassing, and I said, "What are you going to do about it? You need to leave." Their response is, "What are you going to do about it? Call the cops? Good luck." My response was, and unfortunately this is happening in rural Alberta, my scabbard is back on my saddle with a gun in it because I don't feel safe on my own land. So we have to do something to change that. And again, this is not about the RCMP. They just don't have the numbers to protect rural Albertans anymore. And I see that with firsthand experience from this weekend again.
Numbers are a big part of it. Melody, thanks for kicking us off. Go ahead. Over here, guys, this mic.
Hi, my question is, how can we trust your government to run an Alberta provincial police force when you yourself, Ms. Smith, have commented that the court system, which is in place to protect citizens from government overreach, is bureaucracy and red tape?
Okay.
Might I just respond to that? You're talking about two different issues. Policing on the one hand and the courts. And the courts are a separate entity altogether. The police do their job, but when they arrest people and go and seek bail, that's in the judicial system. So you can't conflate the two.
Bruce, while you're speaking, a historical context on Alberta Police Force.
Okay, maybe a little bit of background would be helpful here, because a lot of people don't realize that Alberta had its own provincial police from 1917 to 1932. When Alberta became a province in 1905, its provincial police, in effect, were contracted from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. In 1916, the province decided in its wisdom to pass prohibition, and the RCMP were instructed by their superiors in Ottawa not to enforce this provincial law. Well, but the principle, let's just talk about the principle here. So Edmonton thought, well, our provincial police, or people are acting at it, should enforce all the laws. So it got to be quite an acrimonious debate between Ottawa and Edmonton, and then Ottawa decided on short notice to pull the RCMP, citing something to do with the First World War, as if that was going to make any difference. And the province was left on essentially no notice to create its own provincial police force. And they did that, and they had all sorts of challenges initially, particularly with the prohibition law, but the Alberta Provincial Police ended up being a fine force that had the respect of most Albertans. Unfortunately, 1932 comes along, the province is bankrupt, the Alberta Provincial Police had to be disbanded, not because they weren't doing a good job, because they were, but the province was broke. That's how the RCMP got back. But it's clear to remember that Alberta had its own first-rate provincial police force for 15 years.
Thanks, Bruce. Okay, this line.
Thank you. Thank you, Premier Smith and panel. Appreciate the work that you're doing with police forces. Myself personally, I live in Desert Bloom and have found out, not myself personally, but a lot of people that live in Desert Bloom, that the response time is about 45 minutes out there for RCMP. Part of the concern with that, of course, is that there's about 5 police that are on covering like 55,000 square kilometers. So it's not just Desert Bloom, it's also Dunmore, Hilda, various places like that that are seeing the longer response time for policing. Couple that with, I'm watching my time, sorry, but couple that with understanding that there will be a time from what I understand, that the RCMP won't be supporting provincial police. My question is, is there an opportunity as well for some of the local police forces, say Medicine Hat as an example, to help with a larger area? And, you know, what are some of the plans that way that we could speak to time as well as police forces helping out other greater areas?
There are proposed solutions for sure. Premier, do you want to talk?
Yeah, for sure. I know that Brooks and Newell County asked for one of our grants to be able to look at the policing options. And one of the things was that Medicine Hat Police Service was really, really helpful when there was some card lock theft, that the RCMP said nothing we could do. Medicine Hat Police said, you know what, we actually have some video of these folks. We could probably go after it. And they thought, maybe there is an opportunity for Medicine Hat to become a Medicine Hat regional policing. So they're in the middle of doing that. And I suspect that that's likely to be the case in some of the other mid-sized cities. As you saw in the video, Calgary has a police service, Edmonton has a police service. So presumably, they could also do regional policing around each of their communities. Lethbridge, Medicine Hat as well. But others might choose a sheriff's detachment. We've got 2 municipalities that are looking at establishing a sheriff's detachment. It could be really any number of models. And there's also Indigenous policing as well that we're supporting, and that could be another option too.
Hey, perfect timing. Stephen, that's a whole new subject, but some perspective there.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Bruce and Premier. There's some First Nation communities in Alberta that have pursued and already have their own police force. The Tsuut'ina by Calgary, and of course the Blood Tribe, which ain't too far from here, and the biggest reserve in Canada. So there's opportunity for them to make a big change within their system and within their community, but it's really up to the leadership to move forward with that and work with the province.
Okay, let's get through a few more. Go ahead.
As already said, from 1917 until 1932, the government of Alberta ran its own police agency, with those years aligning with Prohibition, so I can imagine they kept themselves busy. Similarly, many towns and communities operated their own municipal departments, with the town of Redcliffe having one until 1992. In both cases, they were closed for budgetary purposes. What is to stop the province from once again getting in a budgetary blind and choosing to offload policing to others? Also, would there be supports to allow Alberta's smaller municipalities to once again have control on their own police force? Also, will there be any targeted engagement at youth? Finally, Premier, a minor correction. Kipling said Redcliffe was born with all health replacement. Medicine Hat was born last year.
Ooh, I deserve that correction too. I had that wrong. By the way, Rudyard Kipling, If, is one of my favorite poems. You ever read it? It's fabulous. Premier, do you want to tackle this gentleman's set of questions?
Well, thank you for the correction. I appreciate that. I would say a couple things. We want the municipalities to lead this. So if a municipality wants to develop their own police force, we're providing a grant for them to pursue that. If they want to do regional police force in partnership with others, that's another option. If they want to use an adjacent police force, or if they want to use the sheriff's detachment, those are all options that they can consider, and we do want it to be responsive to them. One of the things that we saw, just to give an example of why Grand Prairie ultimately made the decision to go from RCMP to their own municipal police, is they first of all thought they'd be able to save money, and then they said, you know what, maybe instead we'll increase our number of our complement of officers. So they've gone from now having 55 officers. When they launch next year, it'll be 90, and they want to grow to 110. So they are going to be able to get double the policing. And they also had a call for resumes, and over 200 qualified resumes came in. So there is when people want to serve their community, that's going to be a different type of person who wants to apply for a local police force than somebody who maybe wants the excitement of going and working for the national police force. So that is an example to us that there really is a great local pool to draw from if the opportunity becomes available.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Very thoughtful. Over here.
Thanks for being here and listening to all this. I wasn't going to talk or ask a question. I wasn't thinking of it, but running out of time. As far as police services go, what's the difference between a provincial police force and what we already have in place with the rise in crime all over the country? You've got a 5-year-old sexually assaulted in her house.
That's awful.
A guy got shot in his house. A woman was stabbed at a park. And These people are getting off. They're getting back out of jail, back on the streets. And so Alberta Police Force, RCMP, what's the real difference? Like, are these people going to be able to stay in jail?
Excellent question. Excellent question. So, yeah, Premier, I know you can answer this. I just want to say this is part of the catch and release system that the Deputy Premier, the Minister of Public Safety, Mike Ellis, is always calling Ottawa out on. Is it not?
It is, and I wouldn't mind if Bruce would comment on this one too, but what I will say is we're watching to see what happens in the fall, because when a police officer was murdered in Ontario, Doug Ford got all the premiers to say we need to address this policy. Similar terrible tragedy happened in Manitoba, and Wab Kinew said we need to address this policy. So it doesn't matter where you are on the political spectrum, all of the premiers are saying that if somebody is violent and a danger to their community, it doesn't matter what their history is. Get them behind bars and then get them the help they need from behind bars. Don't release them back into society. So I think that the Prime Minister has heard the plea from all of us. We'll find out. They go back into the Parliament on September the 15th, and we're led to believe that some of these bad policies are going to be reversed. But maybe I can turn it over to see if there's anything more that we could do from
yeah, absolutely. Justice McDonald?
Well, just to follow up on that point, the federal bail laws are simply that. It's it's under the Federal Criminal Code of Canada, and they really do, in my opinion, need to be tightened up, and hopefully the premiers will be able to convince the government in Ottawa that needs to be done. But it's quite a separate issue from the police, who are as frustrated as anybody. They do all this work. And, before they've driven out of the parking lot, almost these guys are out, or gals sometimes, I guess, too, are out in the street. So it's frustrating. It's just not right. And I hope the premiers are able to convince the powers that be in Ottawa that there needs to be a change. I think they're going to have a real challenge on that, but I have all the optimism that, led by our premier, that they'll be successful.
Go ahead.
Hello. I live in a small community that is in Premier Smith's riding, and when you call an RCMP, you're waiting for an hour to an hour and a half, probably minimum. We pay for 6 officers, and for about 2 years, or for 8 officers, and we only had 6. There was 2 open vacancies for almost 2 years. I come up on a domestic, and I called the RCMP. I had to wait with a guy threatening me that was drunk for an hour and 15 minutes before somebody showed up. I would prefer to have an Alberta policing force that is local, that is able to respond quicker, because the local detachment of the RCMP is stretched so thin, and they've got such a massive landmass that it takes forever.
Are you in Dunmore, sir? Where's
Redcliffe.
Redcliffe, yeah, okay. Premier, you might have touched on this already, but in terms of the numbers, maybe it's worth reiterating.
What you're describing is, as Andrew was saying, it's not. I mean, it's worse than some other detachments. Mike went up to one of the detachments up north that should have had a complement of 23, and they had 5 or 6 officers. So there are vacancies all over the place. It's 20 to 30% or higher, and it's all across the country. So at any given time, we're supposed to have 1,911 officers under our contract, and at any given time, it's only about 1,400. So that's part of the reason why we've had to augment, why we have the specialized border control team, the specialized scan team that shuts down drug houses, the specialized surveillance team, and the specialized fugitive apprehension team, is because we just are finding that those are going to help to fill the gap. But your experience is a very common one, and that's part of the reason why we're frustrated, is that they don't seem to be able to recruit or don't have the urgency to recruit, and it's creating the kind of situation you're describing.
Over here. Yes, and you don't want vigilantism for sure.
Now,
Let's go over
if I just might follow up on the Premier's comment. The RCMP is having a chronic problem with recruitment for a whole variety of reasons. Look, I had an uncle and 2 great uncles that served in the RCMP back in the day, and they were proud to do it, but things have changed a lot. And the RCMP model simply isn't working in the 2020s. And My own personal opinion is that it's going to be easier for an Alberta Provincial Police Force or the Sheriff's Department to get local folks, qualified people to want to join than is the case with the RCMP. I think so. It's a systemic problem with the RCMP, in my opinion, as much as anything.
Thank you, Bruce. Okay, I did say we'd do one more over here.
Hi, I was originally raised in northern Alberta, so I totally agree. And like, just to get from your farm to town was like 30 to 40 minutes. So I see where the problems are. One of my questions is, do we have an approximate amount that it would take to fund the police service? Could we not join with like Medicine Hat, Grand Prairie, and all those that already have their police services for training there, or where do our officers go? And can't we do something in a provincial level about the court system?
Okay. Touched on some of it, Premier, but maybe a final word on it?
All of the above, yeah. I think that we do have excellent training services. I know I've gone through the training school in Medicine Hat here, and the classes are always full, and it's just wonderful to see the recruits. We also have, I was just up in a community just north of Edmonton. They have a training program. We are also planning on doing another training institute in Beaumont. Maybe Brandon Lunty might want to talk about that. That's his riding, so that they can do driver training and rifle training. But yes, we can do all of that and leverage the resources we have in each of the different police services. When it comes to what we can do with the provincial courts, the only thing I think we can do is to identify through policy what our prosecution prioritization would be. And so I'd be interested in hearing if I'm going in the right direction on this. But I mean, you saw a few years ago when Edward Maurice, he ended up shooting somebody who came into his house. The Crown declined to prosecute because he chose a jury trial, and the prosecution just said there's no reasonable likelihood of conviction here. And so there are certain things that I think you can do through policy when you identify what the priorities are. Let's go after the guys who are committing crimes with guns. Let's go after the gangs. Let's go after the organized crime. Let's go after the fentanyl labs and be able to prioritize that way. I think that that's within the bounds of what politicians can do through policy. You can't intervene in individual cases, but that may be one thing that we could potentially do.
Okay.
Can we do a volunteer police service is the question.
Is the question?
There have been sort of citizens on patrol and sort of like community crime watch, but the thing is, like, these guys are really bad dudes. These fentanyl labs and the connection potentially with organized crime. And one of the things that we found is that I think the RCMP have said there's 4,000 different organized crime gangs or cartels operating in Canada. And that is very dangerous. I wouldn't want citizens to be in that position. I don't want citizens feeling they have to take matters into our own hands. That's why we have to figure out the policing, the catch and release, and making sure that we're prosecuting the right people and get all of that working together to get back to the kind of safety that we used to have historically.
If we do start one of those forces, I'm lining up behind Stephen Buffalo. That is my plan. I'm telling you right now.
Bruce,
okay, I'm just going to save your. Sorry, do you want one more comment?
Well, I was just going to say the one thing that we didn't touch on that was raised in one of the earlier questions, and Premier, you often do speak to this, is about the white paper that came from the federal government and the reason, and maybe you want to speak to it a little bit more, but essentially they had a white paper come out just in the dying days of Trudeau's prime ministership.
I probably should have started there because they've been telling us behind the scenes that they don't really want the RCMP to be involved in contract policing anymore. And we kept on pushing them. When are you going to go public with this? Like, you may have seen what happened in Surrey. In Surrey, they started down the path and then tried to turn around, and then the province said, no, you got to go ahead with it. And it's because they've been telling us behind the scenes that they're going to be pulling out of this when our contract comes up in 2032. And then when Justin Trudeau left, he finally released the white paper that we knew existed, and it said exactly that. Because and maybe that's the way to think about it, is that if you make the RCMP more like the FBI so that they can focus on those cross-border between provinces, but cross-border with the United States, if they can focus on those kind of crimes, money laundering, cybersecurity, foreign threats, terrorism, cartels, maybe that's a better use of our most highly trained police force. And I think that that's the conversation they're having at the federal level.
What a great conversation. Minister Schultz, thank you for reminding us of that last point. Okay, here's the question. We got to go to the next subject. So here's the question. Should Alberta create an Alberta Police Service to take over community policing from the RCMP? Who says yay? Who says nay? The ayes have it. And I make this point every time we do one of these panels. I know you would all agree. This has nothing to do with the officers and the great people of the RCMP and has everything to do with the bureaucracy and the management of it. So thank you.